With Liquor Barn, you can shop your favorite bourbon, that perfect bottle of wine, or discover something new. To place an order for pickup or delivery, download the Liquor Barn app, visit liquorbarn.com, or call your nearest Liquor Barn location. Follow us on social media and subscribe to our email list for all the latest news on products, promotions, and events. Liquor Barn, where Kentuckians go to celebrate life. Cheers!
James E. Pepper Barrel Proof Decanter Bourbon, distilled at the historic Pepper Distillery, DSP KY5 in Lexington, Kentucky. This new release, bottled in a striking recreated distillery decanter from the 1940s, has garnered high praise and accolades. Coming in at number 27 on Fred Minnick's Top 100 Whiskeys of 2023, it received a 94-point rating and was called absolutely delicious with notes of delicate hazelnut and toffee. Astor Wines, one of New York's most prestigious retailers, writes, "The whiskeys coming of age now are some of the finest from any American whiskey producer. This bourbon is arguably the most impressive you will find at this age. Available nationwide with a suggested retail price of $65. Learn more at jamesepepper.com.
Limestone Farms bourbons are like a secret portal to a world of rich flavors where high proof meets smooth satisfaction. Every barrel is meticulously crafted and blended with a specific message in mind. Experience clean delineated flavor profiles that will have you engaged from the first sip to the final drop, making your palate beg for just one more taste. Limestone Farms, bringing heritage home.
Welcome to the Bourbon Life Podcast, your source for all things bourbon. Join your hosts, Mark and Matt, as they drink and review bourbons, share news about upcoming events, interview the who's who in the bourbon world, and, most importantly, bring you along for the fun of living the bourbon life. Now, here's your hosts, Mark and Matt.
All right, everybody, welcome back for another episode of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me here live tonight in the Bourbon Life Studios, otherwise known as my basement, it's my good friend, Matt. Matt, how you doing down there?
Mark, I am great. We're on the table.
Back around the table.
What could be better?
Yeah, no doubt. And we're live. We got our guest in the studio with us tonight. It's going to be a lot of fun.
That's right. It's not just you and I.
It's not just you and me sitting around. Yeah, that's right. We're not on location, though. Last week, we were on location in Louisville with Dan. That was a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. Had a great time over at Porch. But happy to be back in the studios tonight with our guest. It's going to be a lot of fun tonight. We got some great stuff poured up, man. This is going to be a great show. We are the Bourbon Life Podcast presented by Liquor Barn. We appreciate their support. We appreciate all of our sponsors, everything they do for us. We couldn't do the show without all of their help. So, Matt, let's just jump right into it, man. You would tell everybody who we have with us tonight.
Absolutely. I got to say, though, before we get started on it, I love the way the table is shaping up because all the bottles are around me right now. It seems like it's always, whenever we're recording remotely, you're in charge of the
bottles,
the talent supply of bottles, and I'm always left on the outside here. So it's a nice little flip.
Everything's down there with you, man.
All right. Joining us this morning, this afternoon, this evening, whenever it is you're getting your Bourbon Life fix on, we have the star of episode 106 from February 2022, so 2 years ago.
2 years ago, almost exactly, yeah.
Yeah, hard to believe. So we're going to catch everybody up on what's been going on for the last 2 years. We have Amir Peay, the owner, and also Cody Giles, the head distiller at James E. Pepper right here in Lexington, Kentucky. Gentlemen, welcome on to the Bourbon Life Podcast.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Thank you. It's great to be back.
Oh, so good to have you guys back in here. I can't believe it's been 2 years.
I know.
Time flies.
It's crazy. I was going back, prepping for the show, and I was listening to the old episode, and I was like, looking back, I'm looking in 23, and I'm like, wait, what? It was 22, and I'm going through 22, and I'm like, wait, it was back all the way to February.
February 22.
February 22 is almost exactly 2 years.
Wow.
Which is crazy. I was like, it doesn't seem like it was that long because you were here. You were in the studio. You were here with us, sitting right there. And it does not seem like 2 years, man. So But you've had a lot going on. We're gonna catch up on all that.
We did too. There was a piano in the basement.
There was a piano. I know.
Not a piano.
My goatee was a little darker back then too.
Well, we all know how that works out. You brought a friend with you tonight as well, which is great.
Friend,
we got
partner.
We got a guest with us. Cody, welcome to the basement.
Yeah, it's good to be here. I'm a big fan of basements.
Yeah,
sure.
Awesome. Well, you don't have to put on any lotion or anything like weird like that. So we'll keep it kind of above board. All right. So we're good. We're just gonna drink whiskey tonight. So I tell you, before we jump into everything, Amir, if you would, you brought some stuff for us to drink. I'm super excited. Well, I'm excited about all of it. This first one, though, man, we've talked about it on our show. Several of us, we did our best of a couple of weeks ago, and several of us actually had this on our best of list as well. But why don't you tell everybody what you brought? We're going to drink in this first round.
Sure. Well, we have brought a new special release from our distillery, one of our new flagship whiskeys. We call it the James E. Pepper Decanter Bourbon. This is a cask strength bourbon distilled at the historic distillery in Lexington. Average age of the whiskeys is 5.5 years old. Blend of different mash bills of bourbons, all distilled at our distillery. Bottled at cask strength. This batch, 52.7%. So that's going to be, what do we say?
1054, right?
1054 proof. And really just, the bottle's a very beautiful bottle that was originally produced at our distillery in the 1940s and 50s. It was always, I think, my favorite bottle. If you actually look at our little pot still doubler at the distillery, it was built and designed by Vendome to look like that old decanter.
Nice.
And I loved it.
I saw a picture of that online a few weeks ago, and like the light bulb kind of clicked off seeing this bottle and seeing that in your facility as well.
Yeah, it was, for me, I'm a huge history buff, and to have a big collection of these old James E. Pepper bottles full of the original whiskey preserved from before, during, after Prohibition. And this era, the 1940s and 50s, was some of my favorite bourbons. And the whiskey, I have a bottle from that vintage, 1945.
You have the actual whiskey.
I have multiple, big collection of them.
Nice.
Sorry, next time I'll bring a Dusty, guys.
I was going to say, why are we drinking? No.
Because I want people to be able to hear about the whiskey they can buy now.
Yeah, right.
But this bottle, being a history buff, loving World War II documentaries, my grandfather served in World War II, and it's like 1945, end of the war. This bottle was sitting on shelves. How cool is that?
Very cool.
And it just, to me, out of, 140 years of different labels and bottles, that one always struck me as the most classic, timeless, elegant bottle.
Yeah.
So that was the one we wanted to recreate. And then the whiskey we feel is really good too. So we're really happy to have it out.
So that one just came out this past year, 2023, right?
Came out in October 2023.
Yeah, because I remember going to Bourbon on the Banks. And as soon as we walked in, we're talking about Chad, our friend, My Daily Bourbon on Instagram, and he was there. And the first thing, we saw him first thing, and he's like, "Oh my God, have you guys had this yet? You got to go buy every bottle down there that they got. You got to get these as fast as you can." So I was like, "All right, Chad, no problem." So Chad was like instantly a huge fan of the product, man, no doubt about it. So, and you guys sent us a bottle, which is very kind of you to do. We shared it with some people as well, obviously. And like I said, several of us over the last couple of weeks, I guess it was, we did the best of, and several of us put that one on our best of, man.
Well, let me just say, first of all, the show is so great. As I was saying when I got here, I download so many episodes, I can't keep up, and so I have a big backlog I got to keep up, but I really enjoy following the show, and I'm really happy for all of you guys' success. And the momentum that's going with it. And the most recent episode I listened to was the Vendome one with I think it was Mike Sherman, right? Now we worked with Vendome and we worked more with Rob Sherman from Vendome. But really it was a great episode, great guest. And I think everyone who's in the bourbon industry knows Vendome, right? But it's like a lot of people who love bourbon may not know of them. And so to tell that story, like, what a great story. I mean, what was it like? Their stills make
95% is what they say, right?
Yeah, and that's like an underside estimate.
Yeah.
Like on the low side.
On the low side. And they built the still system at our distillery in 1934 at the end of Prohibition.
Wow.
We have the old mechanical engineering drawings of that still system. And I took those drawings and an actually old manway cover, copper manway cover from that still system.
Really?
That said Vendome, Copper and Brass, Louisville, Kentucky, 1934. And I took those drawings and that manway cover to Vendome. And I was like, hey, you guys built a still for us almost 100 years ago. You want to build a new one for us? And it was so cool. They loved the history. They thought, the manway cover is super cool. I mean, talk about a powerful year in Kentucky and in the bourbon business, end of Prohibition.
Sure.
Everyone's out of business for 16 years. And so, yeah, as I was saying, they, as Mike said, they're really, that skill of working with copper is really a lost art. I mean, they are artisans, and still systems these are heavy duty industrial equipment, right? But they are creating works of art. And they were able to create our little pot still doubler to look like this decanter bottle. Yeah. I said, I want it to look like this. They have, that doubler has tapered edges. It has the ribs. I mean, it's a thing of beauty.
Yeah. I've seen it online, like Matt said too. And that's really cool. Because he was talking about the one that they made for somebody out west. That is like a honeycomb.
Oh yeah,
like they
I've
shaped
seen
it.
that.
I've not seen it. So, but I was like, holy shit!
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy that they can do that. So, guys, let's talk about the whiskey real quick. Let's talk about the nose on it. What you picking up, Matt? What do you pick up on this one?
It's really opening up to some dark stone fruits, like some raisin, fig, and plum on the nose as it sits in the glass. At first, it was like really creamy, really nougat-like sweetness, kind of like confectioner sugar with it as well. But the more it opens up, the more those dark, rich fruits come through. The stone fruit is definitely there. There's a good barrel influence. Just really, really delightful nose on it. Nice, like rich, good corn sweetness, and just a really inviting nose.
Like a almost like a dark sugar, brown sugar type of aroma as well with that fruitiness. So that rich fruit, but also like a brown sugary type of flavor on the nose with it. Cody, what about you? So I'm gonna put you on the spot.
I have to agree. You hit it pretty on the head. Honestly, a lot of vanilla, and then I'm always looking for dark fruit and dark cherry. I always hope to find it in these, and it's definitely there.
Definitely there, no doubt. Amir, what about you?
Well, you are so much more eloquent than me. I was like, that's good bourbon. I sound like toasted oak and caramel, and then, but no, you guys put it really well. I get the dark fruits in there and, the classic bourbon kind of vanilla, caramel, oak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very nice. So Amir, we talked about you've been on the show before, episode 106, 2 years ago. So if you don't mind, I'll refer everybody back. They can go back and listen to that show, obviously, because we went really in depth with your background, but also the history of the brand. But can you give us kind of just the Cliff Note version of your background and how you got into it? Because it's really interesting stuff, and I'd like to hear,
how I stumbled through one door and through
it's
the
great,
other.
Man. It's a great story, though.
Let's see. So I, as a young guy, grew up working in restaurants and bars. Much better bar back than bartender. I'm very good at manual labor. I'm really bad at finesse. And then went to college in Santa Barbara. I kind of grew up all around the United States, born in California, grew up in New Mexico, Washington, D.C. area. Went to college in Santa Barbara, California. Worked in the wine business a little bit out there, published a little wine magazine, a little rinky-dink thing. Most people probably use it to start fires. But I furthered my palate for all things food and drink for a few years. Moved back to the Washington, D.C. area when I was young to work with my family, my brothers, my dad in construction, home building. And that's where I got into whiskey, into bourbon. There were some great bourbon bars. Bourbon specifically was the bar started by Bill Thomas, who then later built Jack Rose. And so I got to know Bill and watched him build Jack Rose. It used to be a boxing gym, actually, Jack Rose, that I used to go to and work out. And
was it really?
Yeah, and then he bought the building and turned it into a boxing gym. And so I just really got into bourbon. And I was always into history, and I'm part Irish, too. You can't tell from my name, but about half Irish. And I really got into whiskey, and I started to get ideas about working, in creating whiskey brands. So I created an Irish whiskey brand called John L. Sullivan, named after a late, great bare knuckle boxing champion.
Because you're a big boxing guy, right?
I'm a big boxing fan. And then I worked with the Cooley Distillery in Ireland to do that. Had a little bit of success there. And then as that was going, around 2007, 2008, again, big history buff, and I kind of just discovered the long lost history of the James E. Pepper brand and the Pepper family. Mm-hmm. This is right when bourbon is starting to get, interest across the United States. And here I am in my, I love old American brands, Americana. And I just was like, the little bit that I could find on the brand. Again, we have a documentary on our website we made with a PBS filmmaker, a little 10-minute documentary.
Nice.
That tells a great story. We have a museum at the distillery, and all that is the result of over 15 years of historical research that continues to this day. But the little bits I found at the time then, I just knew, I was like, wow, this is such a cool brand and arguably the oldest whiskey brand in Kentucky history and one of the founding families of whiskey in America and bourbon in America. And I actually have some old family roots in Kentucky and just, and also going back to the American Revolution. And I loved all of it. So here I am in my little 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom apartment thinking, I'm going to relaunch this old brand and tell this story. And I was able to acquire the rights, and easiest thing I did in the whole journey.
That's crazy, man. I still can't believe it. Yeah, that's awesome.
No one knew the brand. No one cared.
Crazy.
And it was a different time. And so that was literally the easiest thing I did in the journey.
Wow.
That was the pipe dream, just sitting around. And then I had to go do these things. So that set me off on a journey to first start working with other distilleries to relaunch a brand under the 1776 label. And then the whole time I've been visiting and eyeballing the old James E. Pepper Distillery in Lexington that was originally built in 1880, in production until 1967, and then abandoned for 50 years. And then after visiting and working with people down, in Lexington for a number of years, we announced in 2015 project to rebuild it. Great partners here in Lexington who love the history, love the old distillery and brand. And so I really got lucky, very fortunate to find those great partners who were passionate about the history and everything and do the real estate side of it. And then we rebuilt it and fired it up in December 2017 using the old historic mash bill that they were last running when it shut down in 1967.
That's awesome. I mean, I love the story. It's great. And you do go into a lot more detail on the first episode, which is great. So I was listening to that. We were like an hour and 50 minutes. It's like one of the longest episodes we've ever done, man. But it's just like, I just love history as well. So it's like, it's just easy to listen to, man.
Yeah,
so,
I remember like just being gripped, like edge of the seat the entire time hearing the story, how you came to things and the history of the brand itself.
It's a remarkable story. I mean, obviously I'm biased, right?
Right.
But I think the one good thing I've done to have the little bit of success that I've had is just be a good storyteller and know good stories. And so that's what drew me to it. And I still enjoy telling the story because it's an amazing story. And it's the same reason why that Vendome story was a great story in the episode. I mean, I love good stories and good old American stories.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Cody, what about you, man? How'd you the long and twisted journey that got you into whiskey?
Yeah, so I was born in Lexington.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then grew up about 2 hours south in Adair County, Green River Lake area. And then came back up for college at UK and studied chemical engineering. I did an internship in California with the Navy. Trying to find out what I was going to do with the degree. Yeah, I liked chemistry and math, so I thought I could do chemical engineering, but didn't really know what I wanted to do with it. And then I came back, started my junior year, and saw that UK was, I think one of my roommates told me about these distillation and brewing classes that UK was putting up. And so started taking those and made some good relationships with the professors there and helped out at UK's vineyard and winery for a few years, and that was fun. And then Dr. DeBolt, who runs that class program at UK, he's a really cool guy.
Yeah, he was a guest. We had him on the show a couple years ago as well, man. Yeah. He's a good dude. I want to get him back on this matter. Want to get him on the show again for sure.
Yeah, I like him a lot. And he introduced me to Amir, and I guess it was like spring or fall of 2016 or something like that. But we met before they were about to break ground on the renovation and walked around the property and talked about it. And so, I was excited about it and then graduated. Yeah. And then the distillery in the spring of 2017. And the distillery is going to start up in December and jumped on board.
So you've been there. Since. I mean, you've been there since like day one of
since day one. And let me tell you, Cody, I knew Seth, DeBolt before, and I was talking to him, and before he got, Jim Beam cut the check for the big Beam conference. I was trying to get him in UK to put a lab for the UK on the second floor at our distillery. I thought from the beginning, I was like, what a great collaboration that would be. And so when we needed distillers, I went to him and I said, do you have anybody? Because he had just started recently, I think, that program, the distilling certification program. And I said, do you have anybody talented, young? He said, let me think. He said, I think I got one guy, just one. And it was Cody.
Nice.
And so Cody was, it was like first round draft pick, top of the line.
Yeah. You weren't what he kept calling Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant, the last man in the draft, but you were not that guy. You were number one, man.
He was number one, and he was really, I got to say, Cody was and is a very talented guy. Had a lot of options for what he wanted to do, and at the time, then and still now, we're bootstrapped, and I knew what a guy like him could get a job for, and I was like, he was interested, and I just said, I don't think we can afford you. I said, you should go get a job somewhere else for a lot more. And he was, to his credit, he just said, Amir, thank you, I appreciate it, but I really want to, learn distilling, and I really want to work here. And he was, I was like, okay, wow, that's real motivation and really going for it. And so I was like, come on, let's do it, man. And so he's been with us since day one, filled the first barrel. Yeah.
Nice. So you just moved up because now you're head distiller, right? So you've done, I'm assuming, probably still do a lot of other things at the distillery, I would imagine.
Yeah, we're quite lean in our numbers at the distillery, so I do a little bit of everything, but that's the best way, in my opinion, to learn the most, the fastest. I couldn't have asked for a better learning experience. I feel like I've learned, a lifetime of stuff in the past 5 years. So
I think that's great, man.
I guess it'll be 7 years in November.
I was going to say, you're coming, 2024 now. So, it's funny, I went to a tasting just a couple of weeks ago with Fred No. And, everybody sees Fred No. He's like, oh, the superstar master distiller, right? And he gets up there and he's talking about, when my daddy brought me into work, he put me in the shittiest job that I could start at the distillery. He's like, I was in the lowest position that you could have at the distillery. And that's why he's like, that's what I did. I mean, I started at the very beginning and, worked in every department and learned like every job because my dad was not going to just bump me right up to the top level. He's like, I would have loved to have done that, but it didn't work that way. But I mean, I think it's great that you started out with them at the beginning and you've worked your way up, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, and I had a great mentor in Aaron Shorts that started with us.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah, I feel like I learned from a good group of people.
Well, that's awesome, man.
Great. And he really, Cody has grown, developed, and such a talented person. I mean, he's not just, I think, head distiller. It's like he is the head blender. He runs point on all the blends, which is a big part of what we do with all the mash bills and the different grains we use. Mm-hmm. He's also the plant manager, so he's responsible for the entire operation, of the distilling, the distillery, the bottling line, the warehouse operation. So he doesn't just show up and just distill. He's running the whole kit and caboodle.
Wow.
He runs the entire distilling and manufacturing operation. I show up, I'm useless. I don't do anything. I mean, I'm not a distiller.
You're just the pretty face now, aren't you, man?
I'm very involved in the architecture and what we do and the setup, and the strategy. And I'm part of the tasting panel of things. But Cody is there day in and day out and making those final decisions and running the real operation.
So was this your blend, or were you already in that position?
Yeah. So I've been lucky enough to be the last one standing when we actually started cracking open our barrels. So I got to have all the fun.
Yeah. Wow, man. That's awesome. Let's jump back and talk about the whiskey, Matt. What do you get in terms of the palate? Because we're almost at the end of round one already, which is kind of crazy. But what do you get palate and finish on this one?
First off, it's just absolutely delicious. And I think it was met by huge success everywhere in the market. I couldn't get my hands on a bottle to give away as Christmas presents this year. It was sold out everywhere. And
you should have texted me, man. What's going on?
It makes such a great Christmas present, too. The beautiful decanter.
But, I will give Matt credit because neither one of us are like this, but Matt's even more so than me, that we don't do that. We just don't. We're not the guys that are going to be messaging and saying, hey, hook me up or take care of me.
Guys, we're in Lexington. Come on, we gotta have a look. It's okay.
But we don't.
I hear you.
Neither one of us do that, especially, and Matt is even much more so than me, that he just won't do it. So yeah. But anyway, go ahead, Matt. Sorry.
Anyway, back to the bourbon here. Really nice, like cornbread, sweet cornbread or funnel cake, like right up front for me, like some of those baking spices, but more towards the corn, less sort of like the rye baking spice side. Then there's sweet spearmint. I think the rye comes through. There's like sweet spearmint, peppercorn, and coriander on it as well. Then those dark, rich flavors like that date, fig, plum, the red wine fruits, just those really like beautiful dark stone fruits come through. Nice finish. Just drinks super, super well. Good oily mouthfeel. Wow. Just a really beautiful bourbon.
And to me, it just drinks so much older than what it is. You know, I even get those notes like leather, you know, the notes that I usually get off of a 10 or 12-year-old whiskey. Yeah. I get those types of notes off of this, which just really stands out. That's why we were doing our show, you know, like I said, we're like favorites, and Chad's like, oh, this is definitely one of mine. I'm like, yeah, me too. There's no question about it, man. Yeah. So it was great. So what about you guys? Who wants to say what?
Well, I'll tell you, the funnel cake, spot on. I mean, can we hire you to write tasting notes? It's like remarkable.
You got the do-all right.
Cody's
got the man.
Cody's great.
Here.
He's great, Cody. Yeah. But you know, we can use some, you know,
I'll take all the
teamwork.
I can get. I sort of have to.
But it's really there's a skill though, and you know, to being able to taste something and taste things that other people like. Funnel cake. I mean, what a great descriptor. And I would never have, you know, pull that out of my head, but it's spot on, right? When you said it, I was like,
I agree.
Funnel
Same
cake.
way. Yeah.
I mean, you know, so.
I spent a lot of time at county fairs.
Okay, maybe
Matt's he's worked in the restaurant industry, and he's also worked in a bakery before.
Okay.
So he's got a lot of experience in terms of around food, but also spices and things like that. So I'm always impressed with his ability that once he tastes something, he can instantly just like, it's like he's got a little Rolodex of things that it's like, this reminds me of this, this, and this. And he can just, you know, he can verbalize it. Yeah. And most people can't do that. I can't do it, you know, and I can't. I mean, that's what I'm saying. You know, after him, I can just say, I get the funnel cake, I get stone fruit, I get the date. You know, like those are the three. So that's what I'm just going to keep stealing your tasting. I've done it for 4 years. Now we're in season 5.
It works good.
We're in season 5, and Matt's.
I know you have to find a different way to like, you know.
Yeah, Matt's my color commentary guy, and I just agree. I guide the ship, and Matt just, you know, does his. He's the star of the show.
Well, you got. I mean, I think that's how Cody and I work well. Everyone's got. You got to find people who like have different strengths and complement.
For sure. Well. Yeah, Cody. What about you? What do you pick up in terms of the palate and finish on this one?
You know, I think the nose sort of matches. I think you find all of it. In the front and the mid palate for sure. And my approach to blending it is just trying to find the most cohesive one, right? And just I like it when nothing stands out too much and it all sort of makes sense. It drinks easy, but there's enough there to, if you want to think about it and dissect it a little bit, you still can. So I'm really pleased with how it came out.
So let's talk about that real quick before we take a break. Was this a one-time release on this one? This is going to be a continuing product, or
so we want this to be this is going to be our new flagship core everyday product. And I think this blend profile that we put together is sort of this is our standard profile. Okay. So we aim to replicate it.
You're going to blend to that profile.
Every time on this. Now, we will do limited blends. And this is the interesting thing about our distilling program, that we can do different blends, which we want to focus different flavor profiles on.
Yeah.
But this is going to be our core everyday blend, if you will.
I'm excited to hear that and to know that. Matt, you should be too. Now you can buy as many bottles as you want.
Out of my mouth. It's exciting. Yes.
Oh, yeah. Well, guys, I'll tell you what. We're at the end of round 1. So why don't we take a quick break? But, you know, 2 thumbs up on this one for me. There's no question about it, Amir. You guys, Cody, congratulations. Great job on this one. You guys killed it.
Just before we close out, in the beautiful packaging, the great bourbon and everything, approachable price, right?
Yeah.
MSRP is
$65.
Yeah. You can't beat that.
You can find it between $60 and $70.
That's incredible.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, for the whole packaging and especially what's in the bottle.
Yep, no doubt about it, man. So, all right, guys, let's take a quick break, and we'll be back with more with Amir and Cody from Pepper Distillery in just a minute.
The Stave Restaurant is a bourbon lover's paradise right here in the heart of bourbon country. Located at 5711 McCracken Pike in Millville, Kentucky, between Castle and Key and Woodford Reserve, Chef Kyle Klatka prepares amazing food each day that features an elevated Kentucky-inspired cuisine. With a full-service bar, great bourbon flights, and signature cocktails, the Stave is the perfect place to catch up with friends after a fun-filled day of touring the local distilleries. Be sure to check them out online at thestavekentucky.com or at Instagram and Facebook at The Stave Kentucky. Three Chord's line of whiskeys embody the spirit of creativity. The whiskey is a true collaboration between producer and composer Neil Giraldo and master blender distiller Ari Sussman. The Three Chord team of expert blenders, coopers, and sensory professionals have developed a multi-step process they called Perfectly Tuned Taste. This process begins by carefully selecting the finest bourbon and rye whiskeys from Kentucky, Tennessee, and Indiana, and then blending them together. Find out more about the whiskeys and distribution in your area at www.threechordbourbon.com.
All right, everybody, welcome back for round two of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me here live tonight in the Bourbon Life Studios, it's my good friend, Matt. Matt, how you doing down there at the end of the Bourbon Life table?
Mark, I'm doing great. And we're about to be doing better, especially because we were moving into second round, one of my favorite pours.
Yes, sir.
That we had in 2023 for me, but also more than that, great guests. Right?
Yes, you got it, man. No doubt about it. This is a lot of fun. I love being able to hang out in person with our guests. It just makes, we talked about it before we even started, it just makes a big difference when you're just the energy, the vibrations, right? The frequencies, just being around somebody and sharing space together, man. It's totally different than when you're on a computer talking to somebody. There's no other way to say it. It just makes a big difference, and it's just a lot more fun. Today was just kind of a rough day for me. And then it's like, we start doing this and I'm just like, my whole spirit, everything just lifts, and I'm just like, excited to do it. So it's a lot of fun. I'm just happy you guys are here with us tonight. We are the Bourbon Life Podcast, presented by Liquor Barn. We appreciate their sponsorship, everything they do for us, and everything all of our sponsors do. We couldn't do this show without all their help. So with that said, Matt, you want to tell everybody who we have with us here tonight in the studio with us?
Absolutely. Back for round two, we have Amir Peay, the owner, and Cody Giles, head distiller at Pepper Distilling, James E. Pepper, Old Pepper Distillery.
Whatever you want to call it.
Exactly. Whatever you want to call it here in Lexington, Kentucky. Gents, welcome back for the second round.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I was so I was just like nosing on this rye whiskey, which is delicious. We're going to jump into that here in just a second. But Cody, if you want to, why don't you tell everybody what we do have poured up on round two here?
Yeah, so we have one of our single barrel ryes. This is going to be a 2019 barrel, 100% rye, some of that being rye malt.
Okay.
And barrel proof on this at 56.5%. So 113, yeah.
Doing that math. And you guys said, I think it's somewhere between 4 and 5. It's stickered at 4, but it's probably
it could be a 5.
Could be a little bit older.
It's an early 2019 barrel.
If our stickers say 4, it's at least 4.5.
Yeah. And this again, this is your distillate.
Yes. Correct.
Yeah. So this is stuff that you guys have made. So which is great. I mean, the bourbon obviously, and we didn't talk about that. But you mentioned it was a blend of mash bills, right?
Correct.
Because the first show we did, we drank a bourbon, and it was the 80 corn, the 12 malted barley, 8% rye.
So I think that was 2 years ago where we just had like our first barrels turn 4.
Okay.
And I think I brought a barrel sample.
That was the very first barrel.
First
sample. We had a
sample.
sample of barrel 1.
Anybody in the media or anybody ever tried of our stuff I brought on this show, and you guys tried the first
was awesome,
barrel.
man. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, it was really nice barrel. Still aging, is
Nice.
in our rick house. And so, but yes, and we do, we have an interesting bourbon distilling program where we distill classic mash bills that were historically produced at our distillery. One is 100% rye mash bill James E. Pepper used to make. And then other historic bourbon mash bills. Actually, they would, interestingly enough, kind of change that bourbon mash bill over the years. We have all the production documents and records.
Oh, do you? Okay.
From, the old, actually, Oscar Pepper Distillery kind of mash bills they were running. And then we have like hundreds, if not thousands of documents from when it was a Shenley distillery from the 1940s through the 1960s. But it was always a, very classic kind of high corn, and then, rye as a secondary grain bourbon. When the plant shut down, it was running 80% corn, but it was actually going at 70% corn at other points in time during that period. Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, I'm glad. I meant to talk about the first round, but wanted to get that out there. So,
and then we do the mash bills. We make sort of a few kind of innovative mash bills where we produce bourbons with 51% corn in the mash bill, and the rest will be a traditional flavor grain or small grain from our distillery.
Okay.
So it might be 51% corn and 49% malted barley. or 45% raw rye, and then 4% malted rye, or 49% malted rye. So those are the historic flavor grains from our distillery.
Okay.
So we call those isolated blended component bourbons, isolated flavor grain blended component bourbons. So we isolate that historic flavor grain, let it distill it separately, mature it separately, and then we can blend it in on the back end.
But it's not something that you're distilling to release by itself necessarily.
We could release them as single barrels or as standalone products, but the idea and the thought behind it is to create this sort of this portfolio of bourbon mash bills in house, and some of which highlight these flavor grains, and then we can get very creative on the blending on the back end after they mature.
Makes perfect sense, yeah. And jumping back to this rye, man, the color on this, people can see that. It's like that's amazing for a rye that's 4.5 to 5 years old. I mean, this looks so much, and it's barrel proof, of course, right? So it's not going to be cut down, but gosh, man, the color is just gorgeous. Matt, what do you pick up in terms of the nose on this one?
It's got a lot of springtime aromas to me. I get like some floral notes on it, like nice, fresh grass, in like the best way possible. I love that aroma coming off of a rye. There's sweetness from the mint, kind of those spearmint flavors come across again with it. Some baking spice in there a little bit as well. But to me, like really bright springtime kind of notes, floral, almost just like flower stems, or just like really nice honeysuckle.
Yeah, I think that's I think the honeysuckle nails it, because I was getting all this sweetness that I'm like, it's not like confectioner sugar, but it was really, really sweet. But it reminds me, driving down a back country road in May or June, you get your windows down, you can just smell that honeysuckle coming in. Yeah, that sweetness. That's a lot of that. What it reminds me of. I'm getting my old baseball card bubble gum.
There's some bubble gum on there.
Yeah, that Tops baseball card bubble gum aroma coming through on that. It's just like you open up that pack. When you're I don't know if you're not old enough either. Gosh, none of you guys are old enough to remember that. Opening up a pack of Tops baseball cards.
I remember it. I'm
old enough. You get that bubblegum aroma, but and a little bit of that, like, I don't know, it was like a great combination of aromas from the cardboard of the cards and the
I chewed some Tops bubblegum.
Okay, sorry. So there you go. Yeah. But so that's kind of my descriptors. I get the sweetness really stands out. I get the rye spice a little bit, but Matt, it's mostly just a lot of sweetness that comes through, which is really, really pleasant.
I get like this wildflower honey.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, very nice. Cody, what about you?
Yeah, a lot of the same. The floral sweetness.
Yeah,
for sure. And I do get like a little bit of bubblegum too.
Sometimes people get offended if you tell them their whiskey smells like bubblegum. I hope that doesn't.
No, that doesn't offend.
Yeah, it's like sometimes it's like, I don't know. People don't like that descriptor. Some people don't care for it, but it's just
millions of people chew bubblegum.
Right? I know it's like a perfect descriptor to me. Yeah. It's like when it stands out to me, it's like, oh, and I'm like you. I'm like, when I get a descriptor, I can actually say the words and verbalize it. I want to say it. It's like bubblegum.
I get that.
Yeah, for sure, man. Anything else stand out to you guys, Amir?
I get a little hint of something of an earthiness.
Okay.
Almost. Yeah, it's hard to say, but it's something to the analogy of driving down through some fields, fresh cut grass. There's a little hint of earthiness underneath the sort of citrus of that fresh cut grass.
Yeah, very, very nice. So, Amir, we talked about the history on the first episode that you were on, but let's go back. Let's just revisit, kind of give us the cliff notes a little bit, the history of the brand, because there is such a storied history to Pepper and the brand itself. Can you kind of sum that up for us, our listeners?
So the origins of the Pepper family brand go back, family lore has it starting during the American Revolution, when Elijah Pepper began distilling whiskey in 1780. Their family originally came from Virginia, Culpeper, I believe, and they said the surname came from that, and they dropped the Cole, and then it was just Pepper.
Okay. Gotcha.
And this is at a time when, Kentucky, what is today Kentucky, used to be a part of Virginia before 1792. And so I think the Pepper family, along with a lot of other settlers, went out west into what is currently today Kentucky. And in 1812, Elijah Pepper built a distillery in Versailles, Kentucky, and began distilling on a property. And today that property goes by the name of Woodford Reserve. So
Nice.
just a little craft startup brand.
Yeah,
You guys might have heard of
yeah.
it. Yeah. So it began production there. He was one of the best farmer distillers, from my understanding, which is what most people did. You know, they're using excess grain. When he passed away, his son, Oscar Pepper, took over the family operation, expanded it, hired a Scottish chemist by the name of Dr. James C. Crow, Old Crow Bourbon,
Right,
perfected
right.
the sour mash process, and really made, at this time they were still selling whiskey by the barrel, but made Old Crow and Old Pepper sort of the first famous brands in bourbon. Whiskey from that distillery was famously enjoyed by, Andrew Jackson, Ulysses S. Grant, Henry Clay, many, many others. When Oscar Pepper passed away, his son, James E. Pepper, at the time I believe was 15 years old, took over the family operation. A little young.
A better time than
Yeah,
15,
15,
right? Yeah.
right?
yeah.
That was,
What
I
the
think,
hell?
legal drinking age back
I
in
mean, 14 would be completely unreasonable.
Yeah.
If he was 14, forget about it. But
Yeah.
15, sure.
And I think the family recognized he was a little young, so they actually said, "Hey, you need some help, and we're going to bring in an old family friend and business partner to help guide you along the way." And his name was Colonel E.H. Taylor, who had gotten into the whiskey business, I believe, through working with Oscar Pepper. So that's why he was close to the family.
Gotcha.
So he, advised young James to expand the distillery and said, "I'll even loan you money to do so." And I believe a few years later, when Taylor had some financial problems and people called in his loans, he had to by default call in James E. Pepper's loan. And long story short, that's how the Peppers and James E. Pepper lost that old family distillery. And then a couple of years later, it was sold to LeBreau and Graham. So Taylor and James E. Pepper actually remained close friends throughout the rest of their lives, I believe. But James E. Pepper, when he was a young man in his 20s, was still pretty well connected. Here he is. He's got his family name. He knows how to make whiskey, but he's, broke. Mm-hmm. So, but he was connected in the whiskey business, and he had spent a lot of time in New York City working to sell whiskey. And he went there and he raised money from a wine merchant and came back to Lexington. And in 1880, built the distillery today, where our distillery is. At the time, it was said to be the largest and most technologically advanced distillery in the United States. He worked with a really acclaimed architect. It was steam powered. And he, proudly proclaimed he would use his grandfather Elijah's original Revolutionary War recipes. And that's why he called the brand Old 1776. That's why we have that labeled today.
So I've got a few bottles. There's one on the bottom shelf over there. Yeah.
So he produced Old Pepper whiskey, that he marketed as the oldest and best brand of whiskey made in Kentucky. He contributed a lot to the evolution of the modern bourbon industry. It was actually illegal for distilleries at the time to bottle their own whiskey, believe it or not. In Kentucky, they were required by law to sell to rectifiers who would then bottle the whiskey. Mm-hmm. And this allowed for a lot of unscrupulous things to happen. So for somebody like James E. Pepper, who produced high-grade whiskey, he was very proud of it, he wanted control over it. And so he actually had to sue the state of Kentucky to change the law to allow him to bottle his whiskey at the distillery. Wow. And so he got the law changed. So he then began to bottle at the distillery, and he would put distillery bottling proudly on the label. And then he still had another problem, though, because then people would just refill his bottles with all sorts of counterfeit junk, right? Mm-hmm. People were doing all sorts of unscrupulous things back in those days, mixing, tobacco juice and iodine and whatever, and all sorts of nasty stuff. And there was no law that defined bourbon whiskey or straight whiskey in America. And trademark law was like non-existent. So this drove him crazy, but he had this ingenious realization that the one strong law then was forgery law. So he said, "I'm going to print my signature on a cross." We don't have a bottle and bond here. I would show it. But he said, it's okay. If you go to our website, you can see. So he said, "I'm going to print my signature across a little strip of paper, and I'm going to seal it." All right, this is great. So anyone can see right there, we have the broken seal. He said, "I'm going to print my signature on a strip of paper. I'm going to call it a signature strip seal, and I'm going to seal it over the top of the bottle, and we're going to advise consumers not to buy our whiskey unless it bears my unbroken signature across the stopper. And if somebody replicated that, he'd sue them for forgery infringement."
Oh.
And that became so popular with other distillers that a few years later, in 1897, when the Bottle and Bond Act passed, that James E. Pepper and E.H. Taylor were two big advocates for. And they actually faced a lot of opposition from rectifiers at the time. The federal government and other distillers loved that idea so much that they took his invention of this strip and made it the tax stamp.
Nice.
And that was incorporated into that Bottled and Bond Act. So when you see those strips throughout the 40s and 50s and everything, and even today when people do it decoratively, it all came from James E. Pepper. So he made these very important contributions to the modern bourbon industry. Obviously, the Bottled and Bond Act was the first law to define what is straight whiskey, what is bourbon whiskey, what is good American whiskey.
Right.
I believe it was the first consumer protection law for anything ever passed in America.
I think you're right.
So I think, in America, we had our priorities right back then. We said, before we make sure the medicine is good, the food supply is pure,
Get the whiskey
we need
right.
to know the whiskey is good. So,
Yeah.
he made big contributions. So, anyway, I could talk for an hour about the brand. I advise people I'm going to give you cliff notes. Go to the website, watch a documentary, or better yet, come to the distillery, go through the museum with a tour guide. But he produced his famous brand of whiskey until he died in 1906. He had a great family story. His wife, Ella Offutt Pepper, was also a very remarkable person. When he passed, they had no children, so the distillery was sold to a group of investors. And then it was in production through Prohibition. The old distillery burned after Prohibition, rebuilt in the 1930s, and then in production, one of the largest, most heavily marketed bourbon brands, I think, through the 40s and 50s. And then in the 60s, obviously, tough time in the industry.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Our distillery and many others were shut down and abandoned. And that's when ours was shut down, 67 for 50 years. Yeah.
And then you came along and the rest is history.
Yeah, I guess you could say so. I came along, but again, lots of very talented, great people like Cody and our partners in the distillery who really, make it all happen. So
What's that?
Totally knocked.
Oh, that's all right, man. That's all right.
Somewhere down there.
All right, we'll find it later. That's all right. We still got these mics, man. We're all good. It doesn't matter. Well, I mean, I love the story. I love the history. And again, you go into more detail on episode 106. People can go back and definitely check that out. So that's
please.
But it's an awesome story. So, thinking about Pepper, I mean, obviously he was very committed to what he did, very conscientious, wanted to put out a great product. And you strike me as the same type of person, obviously. Cody, you as well, obviously, now that you're involved with it. Can you talk about, it's like you're paying homage to what they've done in the past. Is that a fair statement?
Very, very fair.
Okay.
I mean, this all started from my love of history in great American brands and Americana. And then I think really when we rebuilt the old distillery, and we love Lexington and the history of it and its rightful place on the bourbon trail and bourbon history in Kentucky, and so it's as much an homage to James E. Pepper as it is to distilling in Lexington and the bluegrass, in this part of Kentucky, and we could talk about the inner bluegrass region and the karst formations. We can get into all sorts of things, but
Right.
there is, and then I think we just we wake up every day, we make decisions. Look, we're not a huge distillery, right? I mean, we produce roughly a couple thousand barrels a year. That's what big distilleries make, in a couple of days.
Right.
And it's big enough that we can get to a scale where we can do things right. And we think price things right, but we are not trying to compete with larger distilleries. So we have to make every decision about the best quality, right? How do you make the best quality whiskey? And there's a lot of decisions you make along that way, right? I mean, starting with your grain, your yeast, your production methods, your cooperage, all these decisions, and some of them are kind of costly, but we try and we do make every decision about quality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is great. Cody, from your standpoint as the distiller, how does that impact you? I mean, making the decisions on a regular basis. Can you kind of talk about that and what you go through?
Well, yeah, I think Amir from the start's been dedicated to not cutting corners and going after quality at every step. So it makes it easy. The cooperage we get's really nice from Kelvin.
Okay, nice.
And yeah, I mean, it's really easy to blend when all the whiskey you taste from all the barrels is coming out really good.
It's really good, right? It's like, oh, this is good.
And I
this
learned
is really good.
from really good distillers, and from the start we were making really good distillate.
Yeah.
No, there was hardly any bumps.
I mean,
In the
that's
production
great, man. I mean,
process, they set
that's
us up.
a great problem to have, right? I mean, you got great barrels, right? So
We've been fortunate to have great role models. I mean, Aaron obviously was very important.
Sure.
Greg Metz, from Lawrenceburg,
Yeah.
good friend, big influence. Pete Kamer,
Yeah.
just really good people, good friends who helped us, set up things technically. And then things like, I've always from day one worked with one farmer, Brennan Gilkison, the Gilkison Farm.
Okay.
They grow 100% of our corn from day one, in Fayette County. As Cody said, all of our barrels come from Kelvin. We've only ever used Kentucky oak, air seasoned for a minimum of 18 to 24 months.
Oh, wow. Okay.
We do low barrel entry proof. All of our other grains are sourced from the best producers. We've tried to grow rye and barley in Kentucky. It's very difficult. And so, for us, quality is utmost. So if you see mold and fungus on your stuff, your rye, your barley in Kentucky, it's not meant to grow here right now.
Right.
And even when we try to find the best strains, we work with the university to get strains of these grains that will grow well here. It's problematic.
Yeah.
So everything else are secondary grains. Again, we just find where is the best flavor, where is the best source, even if it's a little more expensive. So our process is very traditional. We use a very classic Kentucky beer still and a doubler, but none of even our what we call our classic mash bill, which is a classic Kentucky bourbon, the way we produce it and the way the grains go into it in the cooperage, it's not like anything made by a big distillery.
Yeah.
So you might see, a big distillery who use the exact same equipment and the same mash bill and the same technical process, but it's different.
Yeah.
And, we try to focus not just on quality, but also important points of distinction.
Yeah.
In terms of those kind of decisions.
Now, you mentioned the going into the barrel. Do you go in at 107? Or is that?
We started at 107 and
Okay.
we're going now at 110 on the bourbons.
Okay.
Because we started to come out a little low and we got a little nervous. We always know we can do a bottled and bond.
Oh, right. Okay.
So we go in at 110 now on the bourbons, which is where the distillery was going in when it shut down in the 60s.
Yeah, so that's the same thing from the history, right? So you guys are at 110 back then?
Yeah.
Okay.
We have too much information from the old distillery, like how fine they're milling their grain, barrel entry proofs and cook temps and process and yeah.
That's crazy that you've got that information though.
It's too much information.
Oh, yeah.
It's really good, but it's like a fire hose and then you have to just make decisions and you also have to appreciate where whiskey making is today.
Right.
And I think people are making the best whiskey ever in history today because you have all the wisdom that's been passed down through the generations, but then you also have all these advancements in
The
technology and the
yeah.
science. And so everything we do is rooted in tradition, right? We think we do some innovative grain bills, but we're not using quinoa or buckwheat. We're
Right,
just
right.
it's all rooted in tradition, but yeah.
Yeah, that's you kind of answered the question I was going to ask, but when you had so much of the roadmap laid out for you, like you were saying, you had grain bills, you had everything set out before. What was the process like taking that but putting your own spin on things? Because it could have been easy to resurrect a brand and be like, well, this is how it was done exactly from the past. Like, here we go. It's like the business is all laid out, but you want to do your own thing, right? You want to pay homage to history, but at the same time, you want to bring your touch to it, your distilling methods,
Right.
your different grain bills, mash bills, however you do things. Like, was that process at all hard to look at, like what had already been laid out, but have to deviate somewhat, or did it seem pretty natural?
You're right. It's a lot, and I think what we want to do is sort of honor the tradition and legacy, but a part of that is the tradition and legacy of James E. Pepper being an innovator and pushing the bourbon industry forward at that time.
Sure.
So part of the tradition is innovation. Part of the tradition is, pushing the industry forward. And so I think we do that by producing the actual historic mash bills that were always run at that distillery. That's a way to honor and do it. And to use a grain portfolio that was the historic grain portfolio, right? We don't all the grains we use are the historic grains, the flavor grains. Where we innovate is where we get those grains from. That's innovative. We don't get them from where everybody else does. Our raw rye we get from a great place because this is
Right.
the best, and everyone gets their raw rye from that place. Everything else we get from kind of unique places compared to the heritage producers. And then we also innovate through our bourbon program, distilling these, isolated flavor grain blending component
yeah.
bourbons. Where again, that's tradition, right? We're using malted barley, raw rye, malted rye, but we're isolating those flavor grains in these bourbon mash bills that we're not the first to ever do a 51% corn bourbon. By no means, right? People have done that many times. But what's different with us, I think, or unique from what I've seen, is that we do different ones with the end goal of blending them all together to reassemble them. So we sort of deconstruct traditional bourbon and then we reconstruct it on the back end the way we want to do it. So I don't know of anybody else who's had an in-house distilling program with that goal to blend it together. Now, that might be a little different for Kentucky. It's really not in the world of whiskey, though. So we're just good copycats of what people do in Canada and Scotland, where in Canada, they will distill different grains 100%. So they'll do 100% corn, 100% rye, some malted barley, and they blend them. Yeah. Same in Scotland. And we learn a lot from, again, there's so much wisdom. We take a lot from the old Seagram's distilling programs. From the 40s and 50s, a great book they put out, The Fundamentals of Distillery Practice.
Right.
And so, again, I think we innovate in thoughtful ways that are but very close to everything traditional.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that answers your question.
No,
but
it perfectly does.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, guys, let's jump back to the whiskey. We're at the end of round 2 here. So let's talk about nose and palate. Unfortunately, someone drank everything in his glass. But Matt, I'll throw it to you. It looks like you had the same problem.
I did.
I
had that similar problem.
What'd you pick up?
I was expecting to get a whole lot more from 100% rye of like those bright peppercorns and huge spice, and it was much softer than I was expecting. I really liked it. I got a lot of orange peel right up front, and then some of the citrus notes come through. Then the baking spice comes through. There was like some clove, then sweet tea. I like this note of sweet tea with it. There's definitely the sweetness on it, and then kind of finishing out the palate was like ginger snap cookie. Oh, and that to me rolled into a long, warm. The finish on this is just like super long, super warm. That cinnamon, the ginger, kind of rolled together from the palate right into the finish. Just really, really well done.
It's funny. Delicious. You mentioned clove because I thought initially on the nose that I picked up just a hint of clove, and I was like, no, not on the rye. I'm not going to get a clove off of rye. But I mean, I'm glad you said that because I thought maybe I was crazy, and maybe on the palate even got a hint of it. But on the nose for sure, I get that leather again. Like I talked about getting it. I don't know if that's maybe a yeast thing that you guys have potentially. Do you guys use the same yeast throughout all the expressions, or do you vary the yeast?
We've experimented a little bit.
Okay.
But we pretty much stick with a consistent yeast strain.
Okay.
Yeah. We do. Right. Yeah. Our variation is through grain more than yeast.
Yeah. I just had somebody the other day tell me a master blender that I trust because I was talking about pulling out a leather note on a whiskey, and they're like, that could be potentially from the yeast. So I'm like,
for sure.
Okay. All right. Yeah. That makes sense. So, but I got that again on the finish on this one. And I was like, I usually don't get that on a rye whiskey. So, yeah. But I loved it. Matt, like you said, the sweetness comes through as well. Those spices come through as well. Not overwhelming. Like you said, for 100% rye, you think it'd just be like kick you in the face, right? And really knock you over, but it really doesn't. I mean, it's very nice. It's a easy to drink rye. And even at 113 proof, I mean, goodness gracious. That's great. What about you, Amir? What do you get in terms of the?
This sort of stone ground chocolate, almost like Mexican chocolate. On the front. I think to your point, you get so much on the nose. You think 100% rye. You think it's going to be this minty spearmint cloves bomb, right? And you get more of that on the nose, and it's there, but it's more in the mid palate and the finish for me. But I think up front you get just kind of chocolate, sweeter notes. And then
Cody, what do you get?
Yeah, so I mean, I really love ryes that are 90+% rye in the mash bill. I think they get a lot more fun at that point. And my favorite rye barrels end up having, I describe it like a tart sour cherry candy type thing.
Okay.
That I always get in the mid palate, and I get it in this one, and I like it.
Very nice.
Yeah.
It's great, and this is a single barrel, right? So some variation between barrel to barrel, obviously, but very, very nice. And I know Matt's thrilled to. That's what I told Amir. I'm like, bring a rye because Matt's going to.
The Bottled and Bond that you all released this year was probably my favorite rye whiskey that I had all year.
Wow,
thanks.
I thought it was absolutely delicious. I have more than 1 or 2 bottles at home. Took it home, shared it with the family. It was absolutely delicious. I couldn't speak highly enough about it.
Very nice. Wow. Well, guys, we're at the end of round 2, so let's take a quick break. We'll get a word from our sponsors, and we'll be back with more with Amir and Cody from Pepper Distillery in just a minute. Bluegrass Distillers is a craft distillery with a passion for producing exceptional bourbon. They're committed to the art of distillation, using locally sourced grains to create a distinct and flavorful bourbon that captures the essence of Kentucky's rich whiskey heritage. Bluegrass Distillers takes pride in their small batch, hands-on approach, ensuring quality and attention to detail in every bottle they make, like their limited release 9-year-old Elkwood Reserve Bourbon, which is currently available for purchase at their brand new Visitor Center in Midway, Kentucky, their distillery in Lexington, and select stores throughout Kentucky. And with their new distillery slated to begin operation in spring of 2024, you'll be able to pick up even more exceptional spirits from them, like their wheated bourbon and their blue corn bourbon in the spring and fall. For more details and to plan your visit, check out their website at bluegrassdistillers.com. From our good friends at The Stave comes Lexington's newest hot spot to meet up with friends, have fun, and eat some great food. District 7 Social is a social and beer hall, but it's a lot more than that. Located in Lexington's Distillery District, it's the home of Lexington's first duck pin bowling lanes, and it also features a self-serve beer wall. That's right, self-serve. And if you want more, they've got it. You can try one of their delicious cocktails from the bar or order some great German fusion food from their on-site eatery, Germanish. So what are you waiting for? Be seen, be social. District 7 Social. All right, everybody, welcome back for the third and sadly final round of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me here tonight live in the Bourbon Life studios, behind all the cameras, down at the end of the table, is my good friend Matt. How you doing down there, Matt?
Hey, Mark, I'm doing great down here. How about yourself? Mission control, everything good?
Doing great, man. Got it all set up here. Everything's running without a hitch, other than guests losing their mics. But we won't even go there.
That's
right?
round 3, right?
Right. Oh man, no, I'm having a great time, Matt. This is, like I said earlier, it's just one of those days where you're just like, gosh, what a shitty day, and then you get to hang out and drink whiskey with friends, and you're like, man, this has turned out to be a perfect day, right?
I had a similar day.
Yeah. So you get it, right? So we are the Bourbon Life Podcast presented by Liquor Barn. We appreciate their support and the support of all of our sponsors. With that said, Matt, you want to tell everybody who we have with us for round 3?
Absolutely.
Not that it changed from round 2 or round 1.
That's right. We didn't mix it up. Joining us back again, Amir Peay is the owner, and Cody Giles, the head distiller at James E. Pepper Distilling, right here in Lexington, Kentucky. Welcome back for our final round of the Bourbon Life Podcast.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Matt was so excited. He just threw his pen down on his desk.
I
Throw
like
the mic,
that.
throw the pen, do it all.
Yeah. Awesome.
And we've got something poured up that is...
Yeah.
I like rye. Mark loves to tell all of our listeners that I like rye, but what we've got poured up is something else that I'm really becoming quite partial to, and yours in particular is another one quite near and dear to my heart. So what do we have poured up for this round, near gents?
Yeah, who wants to talk about
Cody.
it?
Yeah, so this is just a little blend I put together of some of our older single malts that we have going at the warehouse this morning. So it's going to be a mix of 4 and 5-year-old single malts and new and used cooperage with peated and unpeated malts.
Yeah, you guys tricked us. I was like, Amir was like, hey, what should I bring? What do you want to take? I'm like, man, whatever. I was like, but the last time you were here, you brought, it was a 2-year-old, I believe, single malt. And I was like, hey, if you bring that, it's 4 years old, right? We could try that. So you kind of switched it up a little bit, and not only did you bring a blended single malt, but you brought a peated.
Yeah, it's got a little bit of peated single malt in there.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll see how this goes, Matt.
Yeah,
I'm gonna.
The single malt is is part of your flagship releases, right? This is in your portfolio.
Yeah, I wouldn't say we have kind of more core products that are distributed wider nationally. Single malt is available, but not really as much as our ryes and bourbons. Our single malt is always available at the distillery, in the gift shop, and in select retailers across the country.
Okay.
But it's something we don't make a ton of, so we just do it to have some fun.
Yeah.
Malted barley was an important flavor grain in our distillery. Every distillery in Kentucky uses malted barley for the most part, right?
Right.
So we enjoy it. We celebrate the grain, the malted barley, and we have some fun with it once a year.
So Matt, what are you picking up in terms of the nose on this one?
I absolutely love the nose on this. It has like a kind of a biscuity, bready, like cracker type nose on it. That's really like sweet, smoky, and robust, all kind of at the same time.
What a great description.
I know. There's like
that biscuit, bready.
There you go. Right.
It's like
Leave it to Matt.
Comes across as like graham cracker, but not like a lot of times people will say like a graham cracker when they're talking about a rye, but this is more like really sweet graham cracker, like sweet bread aromas on it. But there's just like this touch of smoke and like a little bit of citrus too, just like something bright, like tangerine or apricot, just like some brightness to it that really lightens things up to like add to the toffee and darker notes. Just really, really lovely.
I'm just going to say that I'm thrilled that I'm not overwhelmed by the peat. So, Amir, I'm glad you told Cody to go with the lower
Well,
peat.
yeah, this is the fun thing about the whiskey business sometimes. So when Mark sent the email and he was like, single malt, let's see what you got. I was like, yeah, let's see what we got. And you kind of sometimes forget about barrels, like you can't get to them all every year. And I was like, oh, wow, we have 6-year-old single malt. So, I called Cody up. I said, Cody, they said, do you have time today to maybe grab some? He said, yeah, I got time in the barrel warehouse. So it was like, what do we got? So we looked, and we did and still do a lot of experimentation with different barley strains. So that's one of the things we did when we chose our barley malt. We didn't just say, here it is, let's pick this one, let's go. I don't know, how many different barley strains have we gone through over the years? 5, 6?
5 or 6, yeah.
And the first year we were bringing it in from Scotland, we're bringing it out from out west, we're, Golden Promise, everything. We're just trying everything. Doing trials, tasting the new make, what do we like the best? Including a little bit of peated, barley, which we just make a few barrels every year, but it's a very nice blending component to do a very small percentage to add a little smoke taste that you almost would just think it's the char of the barrel, not peat.
Yeah.
And so when Cody, I talked to him and he said, yeah, I'll put something together, Amir. So we're going to talk to him later. And I was trying to remember, again, I was saying before the in-between segments, whether you guys like peat. So I talked to Cody and he was like, well, put 2 together. One's heavy on the peat, one's low on the peat. And I said, I can't remember if they're like peat or not. I was like, go with the low peat. Go with
I'm glad you made that decision.
Yeah, and I'm like, I enjoy and can very enjoy on a cold winter night, by a fire, Lagavulin, Ardbeg, Corey Vrecken, have an unopened bottle of Octomore. I can get down with peat, but there's something very nice about a subtle peat whiskey, right? One that is it's there and you can kind of taste and appreciate, but it's not trying to knock your socks off.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, it's very delicate. It's not overwhelming at all. It's like Matt said, I don't know if you said it during the show or before when you first started nosing it, just almost, you could almost mistake it for barrel char, or, just coming off the barrel and not really a peated malted barley like you just said. So Cody, what about you? Anything stand out on the nose to you on that?
I think the only thing I would add is maybe a little bit of straw or a little bit of fresh straw, fresh hay.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm. Other than that,
Amir, anything else?
Yeah, I still just can't stop thinking about Matt's descriptors because I'm like, while he's talking, I'm in my head, I'm like, man, you should start a side job as an awards tasting competition notes.
No doubt.
Because it's spot on. The biscuit, the sweet bready notes. I mean, that's what I get, a lot of that.
I got to keep him on the show because I suck at it.
It's very soft though. It's not, whereas the rye, the nose was it was like, I'll say big, but it was big, right? I mean, it was kind of not punching your face, but it's 100% rye, it's cast strength. Whereas this is subtle and more like delicate and nuanced. And I think those bready, biscuity notes, very spot on. Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So Amir, we kind of talk about what we're going to talk about on the show. So let's kind of veer off course just a touch, man, and talk about single malt. Let's talk about that a little bit because this is a whole new category, right?
Right.
That's been proposed by TTB. It's not been approved, so it's not official yet. But I mean, what's your take? And Cody will get your intake on it as well. But
as we sit here and speak, just recently it was announced that Bulleit releases single malt.
Yes.
So I think when Bulleit puts out a single malt, okay, something's going on in this category, right? Like it's kind of, should I say this? Probably not. But if McDonald's rolls out this or that, then
I get it. Yeah,
probably not. I mean, Bulleit makes great whiskey, so don't get me wrong. Very good bourbons and stuff.
Right.
But it's as big as it can get, right? And I think that it's interesting. I mean, look, we very much love and appreciate single malt at our distillery. I think for the most part, every distillery in Kentucky now and historically has used malted barley, right, for their bourbons. You need it for the fermentation. So to create a whiskey that has a pure expression of that grain that everybody is already using, that is a very natural, thing to do, right?
Sure.
So it's not a big stretch. People aren't doing kind of wacky stuff to get into single malt. And when we started up at our distillery, we have an appreciation, obviously, first and foremost, for Kentucky bourbon and rye whiskey.
Because your first release was a rye, wasn't it?
Yes, from the distillery. I mean, rye tends to mature a little quicker than corn-based distillate, and even single malt. And there's certain flavors and notes at a younger age that are nicer, So we appreciate whiskey from around the world. So we love whiskey. We have a big collection, at the lab at the distillery, of whiskeys from around the whole world. And a lot of that, a good portion of it, is single malts, right? And I would bring in bottles, and people would bring in bottles, and it's like, hey, here's Amrut, here's an Indian single malt, here's Kavalan.
Which we had some Amrut
amazing stuff. Shout out Amrut.
Really good.
The
really
fusion,
yeah,
great. Shout out to Raj with Amrut. And look, it's really good stuff, right? So we love and celebrate distilling whiskey and making whiskey, and so we spend, I don't know, a week or so a year, couple weeks a year making single malt. We always have, malted barley. We have done lots of variation in terms of where we get our barley from. We were bringing in Golden Promise from Scotland and, different malt houses across the United States, and we still experiment. So when we do our single malt, we're always kind of having fun experimenting with the cooperage and the source of the barley. And so we really love it. And enjoy it, and we kind of have fun with it, including make a little bit of peated single malt for more blending, than to put out as a pure expression. But we enjoy it, and so we have fun with it. But I think there's that point of it, appreciation as a producer and a distiller, and then there's obviously the business of selling whiskey and what do people want and how much do you make, and I think that's a different conversation.
Yeah,
So we primarily make bourbon. Yeah.
What about you? What do you think in terms of the single malt? I mean, you're a malt drinker, right? You're a single malt fan?
A little bit. I got into it after the distillery.
Okay,
yeah,
all right.
I'd have to say that sort of led me to trying scotches more, and I think the Ardbeg bottle you brought in pretty early on sort of opened me up to it. And all the styles. I didn't realize, stylistically, there's quite a few different scotches and quite a few different flavor profiles you can go after, and so I found mine that I liked because I didn't think I liked Scotch. But
what do you think? What does everybody think about the American styles? What do you think?
Yeah, what do you think?
Yeah,
'Cause that's a different.
I guess on the production side, it's interesting and fun. That's the one thing I don't think we had any guidance on when we decided to make it.
Because there was nothing 6 years ago, right? There was nothing. Right?
Yeah. So we treated it much like we did the bourbon production-wise on the mashing fermentation side.
Gotcha.
So on the grain as opposed to all of Scotch being washes and off the grain fermentation, which can sometimes be weird. Logistically, it gets really foamy. It doesn't like to run through the still very well sometimes. I guess as a whole grain in mash sort of thing. But yeah, it's been fun. We put it in used cooperage and unused cooperage. I would say that the single malt distillate is probably one of the more delicate things we make, so it might not hold up to a bourbon barrel quite like a corn whiskey will.
Gotcha.
So yeah, keep an eye on it for sure.
So when you use cooperage, is it bourbon, ex-bourbon?
Yeah.
Ex-bourbon and some ex-rye barrels.
Some ex-rye.
too,
Okay,
you know.
gotcha.
And so this batch that you all have here is barrel new chart of. So is that standard of what's being released out, or just maybe this one batch?
That's for that one batch.
Okay.
Yeah.
But again, as I was saying, we have always done and continue a lot of experimentation on the bourbon. There's kind of we have a fun period. There's a period of time every year where we run the single malts and we run these blending component bourbons. And it's fun in the distillery because the majority of what we produce is a very classic, bourbon is what we call our classic bourbon mash bill primarily. And then we do our rye mash bill, which is 100% rye, but it's a little unique, but it's all rye. And then we have this period where we get into all these fun things we do at the distillery. And I think we've kind of dialed in because the thing about experimentation is you're really trying to pull stuff out of it, right? So we always want to kind of develop house styles. And then if we create something that we really like, we want to be able to replicate it, because you want, the person who likes something, likes your whiskey and tries it once, they really love it, they try it again, you want to kind of get that same experience.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And when you experiment, sometimes they work out really great, sometimes they don't. So like we don't experiment as much as we used to, but it's a fun period of time. And we do play around with cooperage type, and other things. And I think the single malt specifically for us is something where we just kind of, once a year we sit down and we're like, what are we going to do? There's a ballpark. We're always in the same ballpark, but it's just kind of a fun thing we do.
So I'm kind of curious, when you started doing this, then was it with the intention of, hey, we're going to do releases on single malt? Or was it like, you know what, let's just see what we can do and play around? And I mean, was there a goal?
I think we always thought we'd sell it. I mean,
Yeah.
But it was like, we just knew we had this grain palette to work with. And again, It was like, we said, we have this historic mash bills. We want to make a couple of those. Mm-hmm. And then there's this historic grain palette. And let's play with that grain palette. So how do we innovate and do new and kind of exciting things, but also honor the tradition, the history of this specific distillery?
Yeah.
And so just playing around malted barley is a way to do that. I think we just we don't make a ton of it. So it's like, we don't have any, we don't make a ton of single malt whiskey right now. The idea was never to make it this big, mainstay thing of what we do. We are primarily a bourbon distillery.
But here you are, and the whole category is kind of blowing up. Well, sorta.
I mean, it's a weird category to blow up, right? Because
hey, Cody, I'm sorry. Let me see that bottle. Go ahead, Matt.
Like the flavor profiles of a...
This is good. I like Mark drinking the peated single malt down on the other end here.
You, man. Yeah, sorry.
That's a good sign, Cody. You should that's a compliment to you as a blender.
It is, for sure. Man.
I remember what barrels I took. So.
Yeah.
The flavor profiles of this category are like all over the place. I've had quite a few single malts, and like with bourbon, you can kind of pin it down. You're going to get a lot of your caramels, your oak, vanillas, kind of those like familiar flavors. Ryes, there could be a little bit of spice. There could be something a little floral, but for the most part, it's going to play within the same areas. But the single malt is like, I've had stuff you feel like you're chewing a loaf of bread. Some stuff is like your
chocolate covered blueberries from Brooklyn.
It's like all over the place, and it's an interesting category to try to like really capitalize on and take control of.
It's very listen, I think there's a style when people think of bourbon, it's really based in all as Kentucky bourbon, that style, right? And even rye to a degree, there's a style people expect. I'm speaking broadly here, right? I mean, you look at single malt in America, it's just so new. And you had a lot of single malt distillers, I think, on the West Coast who looked at it from a craft brewer's perspective. Mm-hmm. And they went at it using, chocolate malts and really interesting things, right? And that produces a very unique and different flavor profile than very classic, barley used over in Scotland and Ireland for single malt, which is almost more just like a very, I don't want to say neutral, but very basic kind of brewer's malt style, which is a little subtly different than a single malt, than a distiller's malt. Yeah. In terms of how they produce it and kiln it for, diastatic power. But so you have people who make single malt like that in America. There's some people in the Southwest who will use mesquite to smoke their barley. Then you have some single malt producers in America who want to replicate traditional Scottish methods. And they're using a very sort of, again, more of a neutral type of a bourbon, of a barley malt, and trying to replicate the Scottish style. And so really it's all over the map. So I don't think it's quite so easy to put your finger on and say, this is the style of American single malt. Mm-hmm. It's all over the place. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Yeah.
And so how do you carve out like yours in the market?
We don't. That's why we make 20, 40 barrels a year, man. But I think we look at it, and again, that's why we just look at it and say we want to make good whiskey, and whiskey we like, right? Yeah, yeah. And I think with single malt, we're trying to kind of make a Kentucky style single malt, but there's some things you learn. To what Cody touched on earlier, we learned that malted grain distillate is a very beautiful distillate coming off of the still, but it's a very delicate distillate. Yeah. And when you put that in new charred oak, it has a different journey in these really rugged Kentucky weather extremes, right? Really hot summers, really cold winters, lots of expansion, contraction in this barrel full of charcoal. Whereas over in Scotland and Ireland, you're using used cooperage,
right?
And you have this very mellow temperature.
Bourbon barrels.
That's why, Scotland Island, you can have a 30, 40, 50, 60, 70-year-old single malt. Come on, let's be honest, right? In Kentucky,
Not gonna happen.
You talk to the old classic master distillers, you ask them what their thoughts is on a bourbon over 12 years old.
Yeah.
They're like 8 to 12 is a sweet spot, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Over 12 is kind of a roll of the dice because you have this extreme weather maturation and you have this charred oak in the barrel. Furthermore, you look at the raw grains, like raw corn, raw rye. I mean, there's, again, I'm not a distiller, so I'm winging here. So people don't beat me up in this comment section, all right? Cody,
reach across the table.
Cody can correct me if I'm wrong. Again, I'm a jack of all trades, master of none, right? But there's more like fusel oils and when you use raw grain, I don't know if rugged is the right word, but it's a more burly distillate that I think holds up better to a charred oak barrel and then this extreme maturation climate.
Sure.
But when you take malted grain distillate, it's a very delicate, very flavorful distillate, and you put it into new charred oak. So we've had to learn, like, okay, maybe a char 4, barrel with 100% malted grain distillate is not the right
way to do it.
climate.
Yeah.
Maybe it's used cooperage and char 1 or a blend of the two, and we're still kind of figuring this stuff out. I mean, this, by the way, is very nice.
Well, I was going to say,
I jumped ahead a little bit.
Let's jump back and talk about, Matt. What do you get in terms of the palate and the finish on this one?
It's excellent. First and foremost, I really, really enjoy it. Cody, you did a great job with this. It's got really good cereal notes, like a sweet cereal comes across. There's honey in there, but there's also, alongside of like the toffee and the roasted notes, there's a brightness that I'm picking up, like some orange zest or orange peel, some sort of like a bright flavor comes through too, to really lighten things up, so it's not just like this all cereal, all like kind of single malted note. It hits on so many levels. It's just absolutely excellent.
Yeah, I really, really, really like this. There's not, that peat doesn't come through that much. It's more like a smoky flavor. It's not that rubber boot or Band-Aid or iodine, I mean, you don't get that heavy phenol, just, which I can't do, but this is great. I really like the flavors on this. I get a little chocolate on it too, on the palate.
I get that. Yeah.
So it's almost like a smoked chocolate, which is like
toffee.
Damn, man,
type of like Heath bar.
Yeah, and that leather, I get it again. So I'm telling you, it's got to be.
Could be the yeast, yeah.
Yeah, man, because it's like that. It's a consistency between your bourbon, your rye, and this. I get that same underlying tone of what to me comes across as like a leather,
right?
Which means like it drinks older to me. Usually is what I associate it with, but. Maybe it is the yeast, but yeah, I really like it. So what about you? What do you get, Amir?
I get that chocolate note again. The sort of stone ground chocolate. And I just take from other people's good tasting notes, and I learn. I go, oh yeah, I get that. But I've heard somebody describe that once, and it's like an earthy type of a chocolate.
Yeah,
I get that, and it's for being cask strength, it's very drinkable. I don't get any kind of burn or edge to it. It's got soft edges to it. And the peat is it's very subtle.
Yeah, it is.
A little bit of smoke there, and that's it.
Cody, sorry you're drinking, but what do you get in terms of the palate and the finish on this one?
Yeah, I don't know if I could add much more, but
you like it.
Well done, by the way. Well done, Cody.
And like what we went for with the bottle that's in retail right now is, I think, just going after a single malt that a bourbon drinker would appreciate.
Gotcha.
And I've found that malts, the peated malt is a pretty fickle blending component when you're using it. It doesn't take a lot for it to tip the scale over into the peat leaning whiskey, but
Cody, was it
a very low amount.
What was the cooperage mix between new and used cooperage?
So it was about 50-50.
Yeah,
which is what I ended up doing with the bottle.
Gotcha. I mean, again, there's not, and when it comes to peat, I'm just not a fan, but I'm a fan of this. So well done on on the
Yeah, and I want to say we used a medium to like medium high phenolic content peated malt. So that I feel like in the lower ppms, then you get more of that medicinal sort of flavor out of the distillate. But when you get the higher phenolic content, it's more rotar.
No, go ahead, man.
I'll tell you a funny story. So I have a big collection of whiskey. I like trying everything from all around the world. And one night I was drinking a Lagavulin 16, and my wife doesn't really drink a lot of whiskey, but I always like her to try whiskey for that exact reason. Like, it really should just taste good. And there's some whiskey she'll try and go, that tastes good. And so I was like, try a little bit of this. Tell me what you think. my wife, by the way, she's from Brazil. Like, she's not, big into whiskey, anything. She tries, she goes, oh, what is this? What is this? She goes, oh my God, they sold you a bad bottle of whiskey. It's tainted, it's gone bad. She said, how much did you pay for this? I was like, I don't know, $80, $100.
Oh, man.
And she was like, you got ripped off and you should return it. And I said, no. I said, the tasting notes on the website is like shoe leather and iodine and, Band-Aids.
The minerality of it.
Yeah,
Oyster liquor.
Which I just can't get into. The Band-Aid thing kills me because it is like when I was a kid, you'd have a Band-Aid. Yes, I've tasted what a Band-Aid tastes like. And it's like, yes, it's gross. And I don't like my whiskey.
What a tasting note, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's like you don't want that, right? Well, guys, we're close to the end. But let's talk about the future a little bit. Yeah. Talk about things coming up. What's on the horizon for you guys? Either one, you want to talk about what's going on with the distillery?
Yeah, I mean, I think we just are really excited to have this new Decanter bourbon out. This has been the culmination of a 7-8 year project, right? I mean, really we always knew we were going to recreate this bottle. That's why we made the doubler look like it. We always love our whiskeys when they get around, bourbons. I think 5 years is a great place. So we've been waiting for this. So it's exciting. Just came out in October. We've been increasing production at the distillery. We doubled our production last year.
Wow.
So really just want to get out. And I think it's sort of a rebirth a little bit for us and for the brand and the distillery. I think most people know us from the 1776 label.
Right.
So just to really get out there and highlight the whiskeys that were distilled at the historic distillery, in this new Decanter bottle is what we're really laser focused on for the next year or two. And then also to do some fun, innovative blends and just kind of, keep doing what we've been doing.
Right. Cody, as head distiller now, you got anything under your hat there up your sleeve?
Yeah, it's I think it's really been building up to the Decanter, and I'm happy that it's out, and I'm
killed
happy
it, man. You guys,
it seems like it's being well received. So
definitely is.
I'm looking forward to the 10-year-old whiskey once it gets 10.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. What do you got? 4 years? Are you got?
We'll have our 7-year-old barrels in
December.
Okay. So
So very nice.
Sometimes it seems like a long time, and sometimes it seems like a blur.
Because you've been there. Well, it's gonna be 7 years now. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, time flies in the whiskey business.
No doubt. Well, guys, we're gonna wrap it up here. But before we do, any final thoughts, Cody? You want to share anything before we get out of here?
Come visit us in Lexington.
Yeah.
We're distilling whiskey 7 days a week. We're open Tuesday through Sunday for tours and retail. So stop by. I'm usually there.
Very cool. Down on Manchester.
On Manchester Street. Yeah,
definitely. Amir, anything you want to add before we get out of here, man?
Same thing. Just if anybody's in Lexington, please come visit us at the distillery. If you see a guy,
you get a website, JamesEPepper.
JamesEPepper.com.
Yep.
And we look forward to seeing everybody there. And appreciate everybody hearing our story and interest in what we're doing.
Definitely. I love it, man. So Matt, final thoughts before we wrap it up tonight.
Thanks, guys, for coming out here to Bourbon Life Studios, sitting around the table with us, having great conversation, great drinks. The company's always worth it.
Yes, right? It is.
And I just in the past 2 years, what you all have been putting out has absolutely, to me, like first the FKO, it's like, wow, finest Kentucky oak. This is absolutely amazing. And then you started rolling out the single malt, and I was skeptical and tried it. I'm like, oh my gosh, the single malt. This is one of the better single malts. My old man, who's a Scotch drinker, is absolutely hooked on it. Every time I go back home to Michigan, I got to bring him a bottle because it fits so perfectly to his profile of what he loves. So the single malt, absolutely on point. Then you rolled out the bottled and bond bourbon, the bottled and bond rye. Bottled and bond rye is just absolutely amazing. And then to finish it up with the decanter, the weight was definitely worth it for what you've put in the bottle, and everyone will tell you that. So you all are doing everything right, and it's great to hear. There's so much innovation, so much fun coming out of you all. So we're really looking forward to seeing what's happening, and I will be there for Single Malt Week. When you all are distilling Single Malt, I'm going to be there.
Done.
Yeah,
Done.
he'll be down there. He'll provide notes for you too if you need them. You know,
Camp out.
Happily do that. But guys, yeah, thank you so much for coming out. Cody, it's nice to meet you. Glad you got to come out with us tonight. We really appreciate you being here. Had a lot of fun getting to talk with you. Amir, man, it's always great to talk to you. We love it. Love your passion. Love your energy. Everything you've done to resurrect this brand and the distillery. It's amazing, because I'm a history guy myself. So I'm just impressed with the work and effort you've put in, not just to creating the whiskey, but just the work that went into just really resurrecting the whole thing. I mean, it's amazing to me. So kudos to you for doing that. So just really excited. Like Matt said, I can't say enough about what you guys have put out. The barrel proof bourbon was just crazy. I mean, that's awesome, man. So you guys are definitely on the right track, and excited to see. We won't make it 2 years. We'll have you back for sure.
Yeah, well, let me just say, we love and appreciate being on the show. And thank you so much. And it's great watching the show grow and develop too. And
Thanks,
all
man.
the great episodes coming out. And, you know, it's really awesome. And we love and appreciate the fact that you let us come on and tell the story. So thank you so much. Yeah.
Oh, you're
it's our
welcome,
pleasure.
man, for sure. Happy to have you do that. You know, and that's why we started this, was just for the opportunity to hang out and drink.
Yeah.
But
I know.
also to share great stories too.
Yeah,
right?
kind of selfishly to hang out and drink with great people.
Well,
Yeah.
People think for, guys like me and Cody, we work in the whiskey business, that this is what we do all day long, is drink whiskey and shoot the shit. But the reality is we work hard, and we don't really get to stop and celebrate and kind of enjoy the moment. And so to come on the show and talk with you guys, and to have this great conversation and drink the whiskeys and watch you guys enjoy the whiskeys, and this is what makes it all worth it for us. We really appreciate it.
Well, we're happy we could be just a small part of that, man. So, but thank you guys for being here. I'm going to wrap it up though, and tell our sponsors, thank you guys as well. We are the Bourbon Life Podcast, presented by Liquor Barn. We appreciate everything that you all do for us. We appreciate everything all of our sponsors do for us. We appreciate our listeners. Thank you guys. Like Matt always says, whatever time of day it is, morning, noon, or night, whenever it is you tune in to get your Bourbon Life fix, we appreciate you doing that. If you'd like to join us on Facebook, you can do that at The Bourbon Life. Also on Instagram, The Bourbon Life. Or you can join our private Facebook group, The Bourbon Lifers. We'd love to have you in there. We got about 2,000 people in there. It's a lot of fun, and no spammers. We get rid of those guys. So a lot of good conversation. So join us in there. If you want to send us an email, if you got an idea for a show, something you'd like to see or hear, let us know. You can email us at thebourbonlife@gmail.com. And I guess with that said, I need to say, if you feel so inclined, leave us a review on your favorite podcasting platform. We'd appreciate that. With that said, I want to wrap it up. Send us something with our tagline, which is, may your glasses always be full, and may you keep on living the bourbon life.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of the Bourbon Life Podcast. Our mission at the Bourbon Life is simple: to share our passion for all things bourbon with you every week. And we'd really love to hear your thoughts on how we're doing. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at The Bourbon Life. You can also contact us by email at thebourbonlife@gmail.com. And you can always find us on your favorite podcast platform. If you have a moment, we'd love it if you would rate us and give us a review. So until next week, we hope your glass is always full and that you keep on living the bourbon life.